My mother and stepfather kicked me out because they had 2 children. 15 years later, they came to me. My name is Garland. I'm 32 now, and for the first time in my life, peace doesn't feel like something borrowed. It's mine. Not quiet from avoidance or escape, the kind of peace that comes only after you stop hoping a broken past might fix itself. My story doesn't start with anger. It starts with belief, the kind a child is born into. Belief that if someone tucks you in at night, they love you. If they pack your lunch and kiss your head, they'll always fight for you. That belief carried me for the first 10 years of my life. It was just me and my mother, Helene. She was 20 when she had me. We lived in a tiny apartment above a closed-down pharmacy, and though money was short, her energy for me never seemed to be. She worked nights at a diner and cleaned offices on weekends, but when I came home from school, there was always a smile. Sometimes tired, sometimes forced, but always there. She read to me from old library books, cooked whatever we could afford, and told me stories about a future where I'd make something of myself. She used to whisper, "You're the best thing I've ever done." I believed her. That belief made it all the more confusing when, one day, her eyes started looking past me. His name was Chet. He came into our lives when I was 10. A quiet man, worked at a repair garage, always wore flannel even in the summer. At first, he barely spoke to me. He'd nod, grunt a hello, and spend most evenings watching television with Helene while I did homework in the corner. But I saw something change in her. She laughed more. She painted her nails. She stopped talking about money as much. And I thought maybe this was good. A year later, she had twins. A boy and a girl, Kellen and Sibley. The day they came home, everything in our house changed. The silence that used to hang between Chet and me became something heavier. He never yelled. He never touched me. But he looked through me like I was a guest who'd overstayed. And Helene, the woman who once read to me until I fell asleep, started forgetting to say goodnight at all. They were both so tired. I understood that. Babies are a lot. I tried to help. I changed diapers, ran little errands, rocked Sibley when she cried. I did it all hoping for a glimpse of the mother I remembered. But the more I tried, the more invisible I became. First it was my birthday, a cake from the discount bin, no candles, no song. Then school meetings she used to attend alone were suddenly skipped. "Chet has work," she'd say. "I can't leave the twins." I'd nod, trying to be grown about it. I stopped asking after a while. At 13, I started eating dinner alone. At 14, I stopped coming home right after school. At 15, I got my first job bagging groceries and paid for my own shoes. No one noticed. And then, at 16, it all ended. I remember that Tuesday clearer than I remember yesterday. I came home from work, tired and smelling like produce, and found them both sitting at the table. Helene didn't look up right away. Chet stared at a spot on the table like it owed him money. She started talking about the numbers. About how tight things were. About how I was nearly grown. I stood there, backpack half on, and felt the words coming before she said them. "We've spoken to your grandparents. They've got a spare room." I didn't say anything. Just nodded slowly. "You're responsible," she added. "You'll do okay." I turned to Chet. He didn't say a word. Just nodded like the conversation was settled. I walked to my room, grabbed the duffel I never unpacked from last summer's weekend trip to my grandparents' house, and I left. No hug. No apology. Not even the illusion of sadness. My grandparents, Earl and Marjorie, were good people. Solid, predictable, quiet. They didn't ask questions when I showed up. They put sheets on the guest bed, set an extra plate at dinner, and made room for me in their slow, newspaper-scented life. Grandpa Earl, a retired machinist, gave me rides to my job when he could. Grandma Marjorie made lunches and asked about school, even when my answers were short. They never said a word about Helene. But sometimes, when she came up on the news or was mentioned by a neighbor, I'd see the corners of their mouths tighten. I finished high school that way, quietly. I didn't go to prom. I skipped most events. I worked evenings and studied late, trying to keep up. I never told them how lonely I was, how betrayed I felt. They were doing their part, and I didn't want to be another burden. When I got into state college, I made the mistake of calling Helene. I needed help with tuition. Just a little. Enough to cover books or half of the deposit. She sounded surprised to hear my voice. "You got in? That's amazing, Garland. We're so proud." I smiled a little. Until she kept talking. "But you know, the twins are in all kinds of programs now. Kellen needs braces. Sibley's in music lessons. Chet's hours were cut. There's just nothing extra. I said thank you. I hung up. I sat in silence for a long time. Then I called Aunt Jeanette, Helene's younger sister. She was never rich, never flashy, but always had a little extra for birthdays and would slip me snacks when I visited. When I told her what happened, she just said, "Let me see what I can do." She co-signed a student loan, sent me gas money when she could. And when I graduated, I paid every cent of it back. With interest. And I sent her flowers every year on that same day. I made it. But not because Helene believed in me. Because someone else did. Years passed. I worked. I climbed. I saved. Not just money, but pieces of myself that had gone missing. The first job out of college wasn't glamorous. I started in logistics, early hours, cold warehouses, and the kind of coworkers who'd been doing it for decades and trusted no one in a collared shirt. I learned to listen more than talk. I kept my head down and proved myself in the slow, honest way. After 5 years, I had a small team. After 7, I moved into operations strategy at a regional office. By 30, I had my own place, not big, not flashy, but clean and mine. Hardwood floors I laid myself. A second-hand bookshelf filled with novels I didn't have time to read. A porch with a bench where I drank morning coffee in silence. No one knew much about my past. Not out of shame, but because it felt like another life. When I said my family, I meant Marjorie and Earl, long gone by then. When I talked about help, I meant Aunt Jeanette. Helene and Chet? I hadn't seen them in nearly 15 years. An occasional birthday text. A generic Christmas card. That was it. We existed in separate orbits. Then, 3 months ago, that changed. It was a Saturday. I was cleaning out the garage, the kind of small chore you look forward to when you finally have space of your own. I was in sweatpants, dusty from dragging out old bins, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked through the peephole, I froze. Helene. With Chet standing slightly behind her. She looked older, of course. More tired than I remembered. But she smiled like we were old friends. Chet offered a stiff nod, hands in his jacket pockets. I opened the door, slowly. "Garland," she said with forced brightness. "It's been so long. Look at you. This place is beautiful." I didn't step aside. I didn't invite them in. "What do you need?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She blinked, just for a moment, then turned to Chet. "Can we come in? Just for a bit?" I hesitated, then opened the door halfway. They stepped inside but stood awkwardly in the entryway. I didn't offer seats. They looked around. I could feel their eyes on the furniture, the framed degree on the wall, the photos of coworkers and travel spots. Not a single family picture. "You've done well," Chet finally said. "I worked hard," I replied. There was a long pause. Then Helene cleared her throat. "It's Kellen and Sibley," she began. "They're starting college this fall. You know how expensive everything is these days." I said nothing. Just stared. "We thought," she continued, "maybe you'd be willing to help. Even just a little. They really want to go to good schools. It would mean so much." I laughed. Not out of humor, out of shock. "You want money. For the twins." Helene's smile faltered. "They're your brother and sister, Garland. We're family." That word. Family. "No, Helene," I said quietly. "We're related." "That's not the same thing." Chet's jaw tightened. "You're in a position to help." "I was in a position to be helped at 16, I snapped. "And you both turned your backs." "That's not fair," Helene whispered. "It's the only fair thing I've ever said to you," I replied. The temperature in the room dropped. My voice stayed steady. "I begged you once. For help. You said there was nothing left. You said I was resourceful. Well, you were right. I figured it out. Without you." Helene's eyes welled with tears. "We had to make hard choices." "No," I said. "You made easy ones. You chose convenience over responsibility. And now you're back because your new plan is failing." Chet stepped forward, puffing up slightly. "You don't have to be cruel. Then don't ask me for charity." They didn't stay much longer. I didn't have to ask them to leave, the silence did that for me. As the door closed behind them, I stood there for a long time. Not angry. Not shaken. Just done. But it wasn't over. Not yet. For the next 2 days, I heard nothing. And for a brief moment, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, Helene and Chet had taken the hint. That they'd return to their lives, write me off as selfish, and move on. But I've learned that some people don't see boundaries, only delays. On the third day, the voicemails started. First Helene, her voice wavering. I just think you're overreacting. We didn't know you'd be so upset. We were proud, Garland. We are proud. We just thought you might want to give back, help the twins get the kind of chance you worked so hard for. Then came the second message. Angrier. You can't just pretend we're not your family. You wouldn't be where you are if I hadn't raised you. Maybe I didn't have money, but I gave you everything I could. This is how you repay us? Chet's voice came in one call, just once. This is a mistake. You're making things worse than they need to be. I didn't respond to any of them. I blocked their numbers. Changed my voicemail greeting. But it didn't stop. The next week, Helene showed up at my office. It was a Thursday. I was in a meeting with my manager and 2 department leads when my receptionist buzzed me. There's a woman here, she says she's your mother. She's very distressed. I felt my stomach drop. I excused myself, walked briskly to the front, and there she was, standing near the reception desk, eyes red, voice raised. You can't keep shutting me out, she said the moment she saw me. I'm your mother. You can't pretend we don't exist. I led her quickly to a side conference room and closed the door behind us. You can't be here, Helene. This is my workplace. Then answer your phone. We wouldn't have had to come here if you just talked to us. No, I said firmly. You came here because you think I owe you something. I don't. She paced. You can't just abandon your siblings. They were never mine to abandon. Security escorted her out 10 minutes later. She shouted as she left, loud enough for people in the lobby to hear. He's turning his back on us. His own family. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I regretted anything. But because I knew something had to change. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. Her name was Marla Benton. Calm, composed, and absolutely without pretense. I told her everything. From the day Helene and Chet sent me away to the moment she appeared at my job. She listened carefully. Took notes. And when I finished, she asked me one question. Do you want peace or distance with protection? I want peace that holds its ground. Within days, she filed for a restraining order on my behalf. We documented everything, the voicemails, the office visit, past history. She moved fast. And within 2 weeks, the order was granted and served. I thought that would be the end. For a little while, it was. No calls. No visits. No Chet watching from a parked car. My home felt like mine again. My job felt safe. I started sleeping deeply, for the first time in years. But peace, when you've lived without it for so long, can feel suspicious. It's the quiet you don't trust before the thunder. 6 weeks of silence. That's how long the quiet lasted. Enough time for me to start rebuilding. I reconnected with a friend I'd grown distant from. Took longer walks. Turned the spare bedroom into an art room I didn't know I needed. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was creating. And then it broke. It was late evening, almost dark, when I left the office parking structure. I was walking toward my car, already reaching for my keys, when I heard someone call my name. Garland. I turned, and there she was. Helene. Her hair was disheveled. She wore a coat too thin for the weather. Her face was blotched red, her eyes wild. You can't ignore me forever, she shouted, stepping toward me. My pulse jumped. I held up my hand. Stop. You're not allowed to be here. She didn't listen. You think this paper means anything? She barked. We are your family. We need you. Kellen and Sibley, they're crushed. They thought you cared. You need to leave. Right now, I said, louder, reaching for my phone. You're violating a restraining order. I needed help, she cried. And you're acting like a stranger. I gave you everything. I was your mother. You gave up that right when you gave me away, I said, steady despite the shaking in my hands. She stepped forward again, too fast. She grabbed my arm. It wasn't an attack. But it was desperate. Reckless. Enough to make me yank my arm back and stumble slightly. That was when the building security, alerted by cameras or maybe someone watching from a window, stepped in. A guard rushed toward us. "Ma'am, please step away from him. Police are on the way." She turned, hysterical. "He's my son. He's punishing me for being poor. He wants us to suffer." "No," I said, breath short. "I just want peace. The kind you refused to give me." By the time the police arrived, she was on the ground, crying, refusing to stand. Her voice cracked, shifting from anger to sorrow in sharp, confusing turns. They read her the charges. She was calm 1 second, yelling the next. They cuffed her. And for the second time in my life, I watched her walk away from me, this time in the back of a police car. Chet showed up at the station. Marla, my lawyer, was already there, helping me give a statement. He didn't speak to her, at least not where I could see. He did try to speak to me. "You broke her," he said, standing just a few feet away. Marla turned toward him. "You're named in the restraining order. This is your only warning. Walk away." He didn't argue. Just shook his head and muttered something I couldn't hear. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from fear. But from the weight of finality. Something about seeing her arrested, seeing her powerless, made it real. And I didn't feel triumph. I felt light. Hollow, yes. But lighter than I'd ever been. A few weeks later, I learned she pled no contest. She was fine. Ordered to counseling. The restraining order was extended, this time with explicit warning: any further contact would result in jail time. Aunt Jeanette, who I remained close with, called me after she spoke with Helene. "She's quiet now," she said. "Not reflective. Not remorseful. Just broken. She finally understands that you're serious." "That's not what I wanted," I said. "Maybe not," she replied. "But it's what had to happen." I knew she was right. This wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about drawing a line no one could cross, not with guilt, or tears, or old photographs of me at 5 years old with frosting on my cheeks. That line was my survival. And now, no one, not even the person who once read me bedtime stories, could step over it again. Months have passed. No phone calls. No unexpected appearances. No late-night knocks on the door. The restraining order held. Not just on paper, but in spirit. It created a space I'd never had before, a space where I could breathe without flinching, rest without listening for footsteps, exist without old voices clawing at the edges of my calm. The silence, at first, was suspicious. It felt like waiting for a wave that never came. But eventually, that suspicion gave way to something unfamiliar. Stillness. I started therapy. Not because I was in crisis, but because I wanted to understand the scar tissue, what it meant, how it had shaped me. My therapist, a woman named Eliza, had this quiet way of guiding me through questions I didn't know I was ready to answer. "What does forgiveness mean to you?" she asked one session. I sat with that a long time before saying, "It means I stop bleeding from wounds they won't acknowledge." She nodded. "And does it mean letting them back in?" "No," I said firmly. "It means I get to move forward without dragging them behind me." And that was it. I didn't need revenge. I didn't even need remorse. I just needed to stop carrying the version of me who still hoped they'd turn around. The twins, Kellen and Sibley, never reached out. I hear they're attending community college now. Working part-time. Aunt Jeanette says they're adjusting, finally learning what it means to earn something. I wish them well. Honestly. I hold no anger for them. They were children, and not mine to raise. Chet. Still in the picture, from what I hear. Still trying to hold things together. Still believing life owes him a certain outcome. And Helene? According to Jeanette, she's changed. Not transformed, not healed. But quieter. She's no longer reaching out to family, no longer trying to explain or justify. She's just living. Diminished by the weight of choices she never expected would have consequences. And me? I still live in the same house. But now the walls feel warmer. The room's more open. I've taken up woodworking, simple projects at first, then more complex ones. I made a coffee table for Aunt Jeanette. When I dropped it off, she smiled and said, "You know, you didn't have to turn out kind. But you did." I think about that a lot. Because when I look back, I don't see a story of pain anymore. I see a story of transformation. Every time I was overlooked, dismissed, left behind, it shaped something strong in me. Not armor. Not walls. But direction. Pain didn't make me bitter. It made me better at deciding who gets to walk beside me. I don't talk about my past much. Not because I'm ashamed. But because it no longer defines me. It's a place I pass through. Not a place I live. On the first anniversary of the restraining order, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea and a book I hadn't yet opened. The sun was setting. The street was quiet. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt free. Not because the world changed. But because I did. Because I stopped waiting for someone else to fix what they broke. Because I let go not of memory, but of weight. Because I chose myself. And that, more than anything, is the ending this story deserves. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.